faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
This was the famous Glasgow Celtic, the first British team to win the European Cup. Now let's take some calls. Kenny is in London. Let's hear from him. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hi, George. I've got a document in front of me about how Israel obtained its land. And a lot of people say it was stolen, but do you mind if I just read some of it out just now?
Briefly, yeah. I mean, not a big tract.
Right, okay. It says, at the end of World War I, some of the Palestinian land was owned by absentee landlords who lived in Cairo, Damascus, and Beirut. Around 80% of Palestinian Arabs were debt-ridden peasants and semi-nomads. Analysis of land purchases from 1880 to 1984 show that 73% of Jewish plots were purchases from large landowners, not poor fellahin. And that's from the Peel Commission in 1937. And it goes on, it says, the Arab charge that Jews had obtained too much a proportion of good land cannot be maintained. Much of the land now carrying orange groves was sand dunes or swamp and uncultivated when purchased.
How long does this racist rant go on, Kenny?
Well...
No, I'm just wondering. Well, I mean, you might as well call the Palestinians sand jockeys. They're debt-ridden peasants. I was almost scratching myself at the image that you were portraying, that Palestine was a swamp and there were no oranges growing. Have you any idea just how wrong you are?
Well, I'm not the author of the article, George.
Let me guide you to some rather more wholesome and accurate documents.
Right.
Palestine was a highly developed Arab country. Who sold land to whom is, of course, not a matter for thee or me. But the one thing we'll need to agree on is that God is not an estate agent. And God didn't grant land to anybody because God doesn't deal in real estate. The State of Israel was formed at a point in which a very clear minority of the population were Jewish. The Balfour Declaration was made promising a national home for the Jewish people, although the second half of the Balfour Declaration actually requires a bit more attention paid to it, because it said that nothing shall be done that will prejudice the civil or religious rights of the people already living there, which of course is a promise not kept. But when the Balfour Declaration was made, less than 10% of the population of Palestine was Jewish. But now we have a situation where the entirety of Palestine, from the river to the sea, is either called Israel, which calls itself the Jewish state, or occupied by Israel, illegally and by military force. So I prefer to deal with today and tomorrow rather than 100 years ago, but I'm well equipped to deal with anything you've got to say about 100 years ago. Kenny, go on.
Well, it depends on what you think the appropriate time frame is, because the
anyone
Jews
you like. Anyone you like. As long as you're not going to try the old God's an estate agent one, because that's too laughable. That's too laughable.
I'm not going to say that at all. But what I think the Jews were in Israel as far back as 3,000 years ago.
So you are giving me. So you are giving me the God's an estate agent.
No, I'm just giving you a
Do you know
larger
who was
time
here,
frame.
Kenny? Do you know who was here 3,000 years ago? Do you know that the Romans occupied us for 400 years? Well less than 3,000 years ago. But see if an Italian turns up at my house and says, that's my house, because I lived here 2,000 years ago Well, you'll get a flea in his ear, Kenny, and I think you'd give him one too if he came to your door, wouldn't you?
Yes, of course, but also goes on with the UN estimates that the property losses by Jews in Arab countries was 10 times
Now,
that
that's a
of
completely
Palestinian.
different. But that's a completely different question. That is there. I'm ready to debate it with you anytime. But you're talking about the Palestinians who once had a country and now do not. Who once had a house but now do not. Who once had an orange grove, and I promise you it was not a swamp, but now do not. Who are living in exile, who are living as refugees, who are living as internally displaced people, who are living in Gaza, in an open-air prison camp. Can we deal with them? Can we deal with them in this debate?
Yes, of course.
Go on.
I'm just reading part of the...
I know you're just reading. You've got a script. No, I know you've got a script. But for the interest of the viewer...
George, I don't have any partisan agenda.
Well, look, stop talking about what happened in Morocco to Jewish people in Morocco. You phoned up to talk about Palestine. You said the Palestinians were debt-ridden peasants. And that none of them owned land. It was all owned by absentee landlords. You said that their land was a swamp. You said they had no orange groves. All of that is a racist trope.
Right, okay, well, like I said, I'm not the author of the article.
No, but you're on here reading it out.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting. I wanted to put to you to see what your point of view on that was.
I've given you my point of view, but much more. Listen, don't listen to me, Kenny. Never listen to me. Don't believe a word I said. Read Israeli historians. Read Gideon Levy, the greatest living Israeli who was on here last week. Read Professor Avi Schleim. Read the finest Jewish Israeli academics. Be gone with you and your debt-ridden peasantry tropes.